storytelling for marketing, you don't need the entire hero's journey. You need some anecdotes that can help you transfer an idea from one person to another in the most efficient way possible.
Hey, Renee, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I got to meet recently. You did one of my free video sessions, and I felt like it was really helpful because I always read your writing on LinkedIn. You're in my network of people I follow, and you have a really beautiful writing voice. I read some of your blog posts, and you have a background. I think it was a background in Instagram, right? Instagram writing, or was I think I got you.
No, you're right. You're right. I had a big Instagram following for a food blog. That was my first online venture. But my writing background is in journalism. I started as a journalist.
Yeah, so you have a very refined voice. Your writing is not divorced from the way you speak, is what I try to say. A lot of us, when we write, there's this awkward disconnect between what comes out on the paper and how it actually sounds in our head. I guess it's similar to how our clients are when they try doing video on their own. So I'm really excited to talk with you today because we're going to be talking about storytelling. And you would think I'd figured out what storytelling is. I feel like I kind of know a lot of it. I've read Build a Story Brand by Donald Miller. I've read countless stories. I'm a huge fan of how stories evolve play out in movies and in books and things like that. But I'm always excited to learn more about what am I missing when it comes to storytelling. So before we dive in, can you give us the little claim to fame about Renee that we should know about?
Oh, what am I all about? That's a loaded question, Justin. Well, what I'm about online is really helping entrepreneurs, founders, freelancers, fractionals, and startup teams, small businesses get a grasp on storytelling and how to use storytelling in their marketing, how to use storytelling to build a brand, a memorable brand, a lovable brand. I say a memorable brand a lot because I think that's the name of the game. How do you really stick in someone's mind, be someone that they want to follow along with, remember, and then ultimately buy from, and tapping the power of storytelling sounds so cheesy, but it is such a powerful tool in your marketing and actually in life. This is what I tell people. So I started really doing one-on-one and team workshops, and now I've started to build cohorts in a community and do this sort of group learning because there's so much that the group learns from each other, and I just really love engaging with people in that way. But storytelling, I tell people in those groups, it's a life skill. Starting with story and being able to be a good storyteller, an emotionally resonant meaning maker for people is ultimately what it is. Can help you at networking events. It can help you during your sales calls and prospecting. Obviously, it makes you really popular at parties,
That's true. So is storytelling, when I hear storytelling, I mean, it's been used for so long now, the last 15, maybe 20 years.
You mean throughout human history, the first form of communication and sharing information and ideas?
Yeah, you're right.
It is the most ancient form of ideas transfer. Okay,
you got me.
People forget this. They're like, this new buzzword, this new storytelling.
Yeah, I know. You're totally right. But as a former graphic designer / marketer, I remember when storytelling had its moment became a thing, and there's a lot of pushback from the marketing community. Ooh, how do you define storytelling? Help us put some meat on these bones that we're all assuming you're saying, because everybody's got, from the last 15 years, their own idea of what it means. What does it mean to you?
Okay, well, at its core, in its essence, a story is a transformation. It's something that was one way, then something happened, and now it's a new way. So it could be a new way of seeing the world. It could be a mindset shift. It could be a lesson learned. That is a story. But storytelling for marketing isn't limited to this traditional this traditional story, right? Or this hero's journey or hero's arc, which is what Brand Story by Donald Miller is all about. When it comes to storytelling for the internet, where you have social media and you have a newsletter and you have your podcast and you have all these places where you could tell stories, you don't need the entire hero's journey or a storytelling arc. Ultimately, you need some anecdotes that can help you transfer an idea from one person to another in the best way possible, in the most efficient way possible. That is what a story is, right? And we try to do that sometimes through data and stats and figures, which can also tell a story, but crafting them into a story that has that creates curiosity, creates some tension, then releases that tension with the delivery, and that makes you feel something, that makes meaning out of something, takes a bunch of random events or a bunch of random data and tells you what it means. That is what a story is. And that's sort of like the bigger, explanation. And practically it's like, okay, storytelling for social media, say for instance, the way that I use stories to get people to read my stuff and then come and sign up to my newsletter and then eventually, hang out with me in these cohorts or hire me for one-on-one work is I'm constantly looking to create an emotional connection, right? So I'll give you like a 3-second story, an anecdote that I used the other day that actually like resulted in all these things I just listed. I said, I know that like you're supposed to be a magnet with your content, right? And you're supposed to attract as many people as you repel, right? Like that is the sage marketing advice that we always hear. But when somebody comes to my newsletter and then unsubscribes, I take it personally. I mean, it's like they came, they took a look around and they were like, nah, I'm good, and they bounced. I don't care what you say. I still take it personally. I know, yada, yada, yada. Right. And that made people laugh. It said sort of this unspoken thing, like we're all supposed to be like, it doesn't bother me, but like we all are still bugged by it because we take it personally. And so I just named that feeling and I made it funny and it resulted in like, several new signups to my newsletter.
Oh, that's cool. Naming the feeling.
Yeah. It was a 5-sentence story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You remind me of, I'm a huge fan of watching the Dropout TV series on YouTube by Sam Reich. It's this formerly college humor, but now they go all in on good, a lot of improv and a lot of these really cool situations. If you put a bunch of improv comedians in very specific situations, like a game show or whatever, it results in hilarious moments. And I'm a big fan of it. My wife and I will watch it late, at night before we go to bed. What I learned from that is one of the biggest powerful things you can do in improv when you're stuck is you just name what you're thinking. You just name what you're feeling. Just like you said that. It just stuck out to me right away. It's like, oh, it's so interesting. And it gets people to laugh because you're just being real about where you're at. And it like depressurizes, resets everything. So you can then think about what's the next thing I'm going to say. And I think where a lot of improv comedians get in trouble is they try to push through that when they're stuck and it doesn't stick. And so it's interesting you hearing that. I was like, I wonder if there's a theme there, just naming what you're feeling. Is that part of storytelling?
Totally. I'm going to write a whole newsletter about it. I'm going to write that down right now.
Yeah. I can't remember. There's a clip. I'm sure there's a clip. Everything on that show is clipped and turned into shorts. Probably Google it and find it.
Are they the ones that did If Google Were a Guy?
Yeah. A long time ago, back when they were college humor. It's so a good one. That's their old stuff. Their new stuff is way more improv based and talent based. It's really good. I recommend it. So there's this element of when you tell stories that you do have to open up from time and time again, right? To tell a good story, you have to be vulnerable. Let's be real. I mean, I can't tell other people's stories. Maybe you can tell me. Maybe I can't tell other people's stories all day, every day. But I mean, I'm assuming that's not what you mean when you're talking about storytelling.
It's part of what I mean. So there are lots of different stories that you can tell. There's your customer story, which is maybe what you're talking about in terms of telling other people's stories, or like bigger brand stories that you can use is to highlight a point that you're trying to make. There's metaphors, right? But then there's your founder story, your journey to insight story. There's the greater context story, like what's going on in your industry and why it matters and why it matters now to your audience. But personal storytelling, I think, is one of the most valuable underused tools, especially now when everybody is either a solopreneur or they're an employee working for a brand, being asked to be, essentially an influencer for the brand or an amplifier for the brand. And everyone's like recognizing, how important the connecting with people People over brands is now. And the most effective way to do that is by telling more personal stories. But people don't do it because they're afraid. They're afraid of exposure. They're afraid of being taken out of context. They're afraid of sounding, they're afraid of damaging their credibility or whatever it is. So, this is the number one thing I speak to and help people work on is like getting over that, right? Getting over that and building that muscle and that confidence to open up a little bit more. And I have yet to run into a situation where someone opened up and it backfired, right? People who are very clear on their values, very grounded in their point of view and their experiences, very clear with their goals, and very aware of what their audience wants, needs, feels. These are the ones that really excel at personal storytelling. It can go bad. Like, I think I haven't written about this yet, but Tesla is a huge example right now of like this story is everything, right? Tesla is at a point right now, their product is way better than when they started, right? It's more convenient, it's more affordable. Like, if you just look at that story alone, like the company should be doing great. But actually, their stock plummeted at the beginning of the year. Their profit and their revenue is down. And you can make an argument that, well, it's because like all these other brands are entering the EV space and like maybe EV technology has slowed. But you go around San Francisco and every other Tesla that I see has a bumper sticker that says, I bought this before Elon went crazy, right? Or like, make Tesla less embarrassing again. Like, people literally have this bumper sticker on their Teslas or they're getting rid of them, and it's because of the story that's now, Elon, a lot of people don't love what he's doing in government. He's now out of line with the original values that he first had when he set out, to take over Tesla. And people bought Tesla because, like you buy anything, because it was a reflection of themselves and their identity, right? Like, I'm an early adopter of technology. I am, someone who cares about the climate. Like, I am all these things. This is what my Tesla represents. But now it's like, I don't want to be associated with Tesla. All branding comes back to, identity and belonging. And I think you don't have to worry about that if like you ultimately are very grounded in these things and don't, or like you're aware of how you want to evolve and you might, alienate a certain group that was following you at one point, but now you're like, going for this other group of people that align with you and your values and your belief systems and your point of view and your opinions and all these things.
Can you think back to the first time you opened up the kimono, so to speak, and you were vulnerable on LinkedIn?
I have told this story a few times. When I first took to LinkedIn, I was like doing what everybody else was doing the first 3 months. I was like trying to be an expert, right? I was like, oh, so you should know about brand and content marketing. And nobody was listening to me. And then I started just being like, F it. I'm just going to talk about my experience, what I'm doing, what I'm building, who I've helped, how I've helped them, what I'm thinking, what I'm struggling with. And it was like overnight that I started seeing a difference in terms of like my engagement skyrocketing, my follower count rocketing. People are like, oh, she's got something to say. And it's different. And it's different because it's just grounded in my experiences, right? It's rooted in my lived experiences. So no expert could replicate. Even though I was saying some of the same things, I was saying it through my unique lens or explaining it through my unique lens and point of view. But the last time I was really vulnerable actually was in my newsletter. I teased it on LinkedIn, but I didn't give away the full story. And I told an intimate story about when I was first going through my divorce. And I essentially decided, in order to process or not process, or I was going through a lot, but I decided I was going to date all of San Francisco. I was like, got on the dating apps. Dating apps did not exist when I was first dating before I got married. I got married when I was 25. And so I got divorced when I was 35, and Hinge was on fire, and I was like, I'm gonna go on all the dates in San Francisco. And I think I told the story about how ultimately I think what I was looking for was just validation. I wanted to know that I was still wanted. And the story I tell is how I, like, for the first time in any of these dates, I just showed up as 100% unapologetically myself because I felt like I had nothing to lose. I was like, I've lost everything. I feel like I have nothing to lose. So I'm just going to show up to all of these, not expecting anything and not trying to be anyone I'm not, which was like a little bit of a mess at the time. If I'm quite, if I look back, I was like, that was a little bit of a mess. And I never had a bad date. I had plenty of second dates. And I ultimately found my now long-term partner that I've been in a relationship for 5 years, and I realized I was like, just by opening up, I gave other people the permission to open up to me. And so the result was just like intimate relationships right off the bat, intimate conversations, no small talk, no pretense, nothing. And I actually ended up getting a lot of friendships out of this. I never had a bad date. Like I had plenty of dates that were like, we don't need to see each other again, but like it was really nice to meet you and hear your story. And so I wrote about that in my newsletter, and it was like the most response I've ever gotten in my newsletter. And it was ultimately about like, we say that like you need to have some distance from your wounds. You need to be able to, give it shape and perspective and a lesson. And I was like, but what if we actually shared a little bit more of the raw and unfinished? Like what would happen then? And just kind of posing that question. And I have plenty of examples that I've shared of people that have done that. And I've asked them, how's business? Since you shared about your depression diagnoses online. And they're like, business has never been better.
Yeah, it's really resonating with me why that works. I mean, we are talking about business content and content marketing, but as humans, it comes back to human experience as well. It's an interesting dichotomy where sometimes they don't feel like they belong together. But the reason that works is because when you open up, when you are yourself, people do, like you said, they feel like they can be more themselves. And if you leverage that in a business setting, boy, there's way less mess you have to deal with in terms of sussing out where the other client is at. I've had clients, you're reminding me of like conversations I've had with clients over the years. Call it a strength or whatever. It's not a brag moment, but it's just like realizing people said, I really appreciate how transparent you are, and I was like, oh, okay, that's neat. But guess that's how my parents raised me. I'm probably overly transparent. That's one of the things with ADHD. And I talk about, that's my kind of version of stuff I share a lot. A founder with ADHD, which fun fact, they say 30% of founders have ADHD, according to.
Really? I thought it was way higher than that.
That's the study I see. But every time I talk to a founder, I'm like, is it 30%? Because I feel like it's every conversation these days. So we're talking about storytelling in a business context. When I think about storytelling in my business, often I have all these stories, and I'm a fairly good anecdotal storyteller. But what I'm struggling with these days is like, well, what's a story worth telling? What's a story not worth telling? Because there's a lot of random stories. And in fact, you see that a lot on LinkedIn, Renee, right? Like the person that shares this random story about how they ate their lemon for breakfast and how it has to do with B2B business development. Like,
I don't consider those random stories. I actually consider those forced stories.
Forced stories. Yeah. So how does someone know they're not forcing a story?
You think if it feels forced, probably when you're writing it, it reads forced, and that's why it comes off as cringy. What stories to tell and what not to tell. I mean, I have a whole system for this. But ultimately, the way to organize this, the simplest way to organize it in a short podcast to introduce you to the concept is one, like get clear on that main premise around your work. So whatever it is, okay. So for me, for instance, it is, it's this idea that personal storytelling opens up business opportunities. All right. He's like, clearly I need to work to like succinctly shape that. But ultimately it's like this concept. So all of my messaging, a lot of my messaging, actually, I'll back up. My greater premise is that we should aim to create connection through our content, right? Okay. So that's like the more, this is the tagline, right? Like this is the big brand premise. Connection. And for me, that connection comes through personal storytelling. So that's like one of my messaging pillars, right? For me, this connection comes from like really finding and helping people find meaning, finding the meaning and helping people make meaning, right? It comes through collaborations. and community building, like true community building, right? Not like broadcasting to a follower or an audience. So those are like my three messaging pillars that ultimately come back to this big message. And I do own that in people's minds. When people think connection, they think, oh, Renee's a really good person to follow for like really meaningful connection. I own storytelling in people's minds. They've told me this. Like, I know I need to be, I keep thinking I need to take your course, or, I want to sign up for one of your services. Like, I know I need to be a better storyteller, and you're the person that has that space in my mind. Right. And so get clear on that core premise is that brand promise, that vision of the future is for you. You're the thing that you're working on. And then from there, what are all the messages that support that? And now you're coming up with like some messaging containers or frameworks or guidelines, right? Then from there, start to think, okay, what are the stories within these messaging frameworks? Again, what do I value? What are my strongly held opinions as it relates to my business? Right? What do I care about? Why am I doing this? Why does this matter? Why does this matter? Why have I chosen my target audience? Why this industry? What's happening in this industry? And you're like, why? Why does any of it matter? Right? Is ultimately the question you're asking. And then you find the intersection between what your customers care about, what matters to them, why this matters now, what problems they're solving, what pain points you're solving for. And then think of the stories, like ultimately what's the core emotion that's driving these things? Is it shame? Is it fear? Is it, is it confidence? Is it fear of missing out? Like what are the core emotional drivers? And then you can find stories of like, when is a time I have felt that way that can highlight this thing? You can connect it to your own experience and work backwards that way. That's like one way to do it.
That's really helpful to think through that. Yeah, there are quite a bit, a couple layers there of clarity you need to have, but then you connect it back to what are their experience and what's my experience. And then I think once you're aware of that, there's this really cool effect. I forget what it's called, the psychological thing. When you tell your brain something's important to you, for example, if you buy a nice pair of shoes, all of a sudden it's the shoes everywhere. There's a name for this. I forget what it's called, but if you start, once oh, this is the experience that my clients have, all of a sudden you're going to start. Like that's how I've noticed. That's probably how I don't know. I notice a lot of things and notice too many things. I have ADHD. It's a problem. It's a gift. It's a curse. And that's probably what helps me be anecdotal is I always have something to reference. Tia, my wife says, whenever we go to parties, we go to gatherings, you have a story for every thing. Like, all these random things. And I'm like, it's just my brain. It's like gathering information to store up for later when I've got the moment to release that information. And not everybody has that. And it's not always helpful to have all these random stories in here.
No, but it's really helpful to have those stories in a place. So that's kind of, so that there's another way to do this, right? And there's that other system that you could build. And I have this system, this habit of noticing also, but then I turn that habit into a habit for content. So every day I write down those things that I notice, right? When I'm out in the grocery store, when I'm walking around, and if I haven't done it, I sit down at the end of the night. What did I notice today? If I had to tell, this comes from Matthew Deck's Storyworthy and his homework for life. He's like, if I had to tell a 5-minute story today, what would the story be about? Every night I force myself to do this exercise, right? I don't force myself. It's fun. You don't write out the whole story. You just write out the things you noticed, right? Like yesterday, let's see what happened yesterday. I was in front of my computer for most of the day, but then what did I do? I picked up my kids up from school. We came home. Oh, we had pot pies for dinner because we went to Tahoe over the weekend, and we stopped at this little place that's known for its pies. It's like part of the reason that you go to Tahoe, because Auburn is on the way, and Aikida's where you get those pot pies. So it's just like none of these things are a story yet, right? But what I'm looking for in all of these things is the meaning, is like the moment where like something shifted for me, right? And like for me is like I know pot pies is one of my daughter's favorite things, but I never make them. I always go out to get them. And this trip to Aikidas is something that is like special. We only get this now. We only get pot pies during this time, and now it's this special thing. So pot pies are not something that you make every day. Pot pies are you make something when you have a special occasion. And this trip to Tahoe is now the special occasion to do this. Whether other times in your life, what else do you make a ritual because of what it represents? Like now I could turn it into a story that's like a metaphor. I'm not saying this is a good example. This is literally off the top of my head from trying to do, but I'm doing that exercise, right?
You're proving the fact that because you've been doing the exercises, you have an example to pull from that's recent if you needed to make the connection with your buyers or whoever. Random conversation. Yeah, making the practice of writing things down. Who was it? That was another speaker trainer from Australia. I think I learned that from. He said, if you want to become a better storyteller, you have to start writing down the stories ahead of time.
Yes, absolutely. 100% every day.
And you may not know what they're for,
Mm-mm.
but you're training your brain to look for them.
Mm-hmm.
So you're ready
exactly
in the moment to draw from that moment, even if it's 3 months later.
Exactly.
And that's a good practice. That's a really good practice. One of the benefits maybe of journaling too, which is a 2-for-1.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of like, I like to think of it as journaling light. I could never keep up a journaling practice because it started to feel like work. And as soon as something starts to feel like work, your body literally resists doing it. Right. So if it's something that's just like habit or fun exercise, you're going to do it. Like habit, you got to brush your teeth. So you're just going to brush your teeth. Brush your teeth.
Really good tips today, Renee. Really good stuff. Gave me a practical idea there with the writing things down rather than just relying on my memory to suck it up and hold on to it and for an indefinite amount of time. It's a good practice to find myself in. And all right, so if someone's interested in learning more about you, Renee, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Renee Lynn Froyo, Frojo. Or sign up for my newsletter, agoodreputation.online.
All right. Well, Renee, thank you for the delightful conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you.